Mock Draft Monday. We're back with another Utility Sports 2025 NBA mock draft. And as you can see here on the screen, we're going to do a little bit of a lottery simulation here as well. A lot of comments last week asking for another lottery sim. So here you are. If you guys want to see something else special in future mock drafts, make sure to go comment that down below. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe. You guys know the drill at this point. And here we are, the first pick, the Philadelphia tanking 76ers. The top 6 protected pick will be staying in Philadelphia. The Jazz moved down one spot to 2. The Wizards now at pick number 3. The Portland Trailblazers jump up into that final lottery spot at pick number 4. The rest of the order there is on the screen for you. Now, a lot of time for me to go to work here, put together that mock draft, and we'll be back momentarily. Alright, so here we are now with the first overall pick, and the Philadelphia 76ers winning the draft lottery would send a ton of people spiraling. I think it would be a crazy turn of events. Of course, they do owe this pick, if it's outside of the top 6, to Oklahoma City. As we get further and further down the stretch of the season, that does not look like it will convey to the Thunder. The tanking 76ers are protecting themselves, and getting the first overall pick here would be pretty crazy. Now this franchise has had the first overall pick multiple times within the last 10 years or so. You think about Ben Simmons, think about Markelle Fultz, who they ultimately traded up to get at pick number 1. Now they have a chance to finally get it right, get the player next to Joel Embiid, next to Tyrese Maxey, next to Jared McCain, who had a very good rookie season before being injured earlier this year. And that player here, first overall for Philadelphia, is, of course, Cooper Flagg, who has been utterly dominant this year for the Duke Blue Devils. And I think we've really seen a two-way masterpiece type of season from him, one where the expectations were extremely high for someone who came into college basketball at just 17 years old. Remember, he reclassified up, moved up a draft class by reclassifying earlier. His twin brother, Ace Flagg, is still playing in high school technically. He's committed to Maine. He is going to be a freshman in college next season. So Cooper Flagg, his brilliance this year has been marvelous and really fun to watch. And I think specifically the way that he dominates games. He's been an on-ball player for Duke, and I think that's been a continued ramp up over the last 4 or 5 years. You know, the amount of time I've spent watching Cooper Flagg in the half decade is pretty enormous. And in the last 4 or 5 years specifically, we have seen a real ramp up in his on-ball usage and his skill development leading up to his NBA career. And I think there was a lot of foresight, both from his high school coaches. You look at Montverde Academy, who has had a historic coach. He is obviously leaving Montverde now, but really built a lot of success there and really instilled a lot of confidence in Cooper Flagg as well to be an on-ball dominant player. And then for Philadelphia specifically, there's a benefit here because even though he has worked on a lot of those tools, worked in a lot of those traits and skills as an on-ball creator, something I think the 76ers could definitely still use at this point in time, he also has a ton of experience at Duke and just throughout his AAU run as a high school kid playing off the ball. And of course, he has the athletic physical gifts to succeed in those areas as well from a functional athleticism standpoint. We've seen this kid thrive in pretty much any role. Cutter, screen and roll, screen and short roll. This year he's connected a ton with Maluach as a lob guy off of those short roll passes. There's so much to work with here. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me, not only is Cooper Flagg coachable, but he has the tools to be coached. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked. There's a lot of kids who come into the NBA draft or go into college settings and want to get better, want to learn, but they don't have the tools and traits to be super successful while learning. And Cooper Flagg has the best of both worlds here. He wants to learn, he wants to be pushed hard, but he also has the tools and traits to be used on the ball, off the basketball, and be successful in whatever team context you have. And I think for a team with the 76ers team context right now, where they already have a former MVP, hopefully he can get healthy and stay healthy. That's a huge question right now. The Sixers could maybe entertain a rebuild around Cooper Flagg, or they could look at their roster and say, Cooper Flagg does pretty much everything that we're missing, and we can try and win right now with him. I don't mind that pathway. I also wouldn't mind the rebuild pathway because I think Cooper Flagg is going to be so good that you could build around him legitimately moving forward. So the Sixers would have a real optionality here, but I think nonetheless picking Cooper Flagg first overall is about as easy as it gets. Moving on to pick number 2, we have the Utah Jazz here now. And Dylan Harper specifically is a really interesting pickup here for the Jazz. And the reason why I think Dylan Harper should be the second overall pick in this mock draft, first of all, I think the Jazz, if you look back to the recruiting ranks, you look at how they're going to try and find upside, especially this high in the draft, something they haven't had quite yet under Danny Ainge's tutelage and under Danny Ainge's front office expertise at this point in time. They need upside, they need talent. And Dylan Harper has a ton of it. Last week in my mock draft Monday, I talked about his ability to split the pick and roll, beat drop coverage, beat hedges by getting downhill. That's something that I do think is a huge positive for him. But there are some concerns. He's not the most successful long-range two-point jump shooter. He's not the most successful three-point jump shooter so far in his college career, where he shot just 33.3% on threes this season. But he did shoot them on high volume, over 5 3-point attempts a game. So when it comes to his statistical profile, there are some things that you want to maybe be a little bit, cautious about, a little bit wary of. But at the same time, there is still a lot of positives as well. Still had a 59% true shooting percentage this season. Free throw rate's pretty good. And his net rating was actually a +8. And for anyone who watched Rutgers this year, the Scarlet Knights were not very good. So for Dylan Harper to be a +8 net rating, I do think is pretty indicative of how much better he made that team specifically. It's not like he made them an elite team or anything like that, but he made them a pretty good, pretty competitive team when he was on the floor. And I think for Utah specifically here, you look at their backcourt, I think they still have a ton of questions with, Keontae George, and you're looking at, obviously, Isaiah Collier, who they took in the first round last year at the end of the first round. For me, Dylan Harper is a player that I think talent-wise supersedes all of those guys. He's a better scorer of the basketball than Isaiah Collier. He's a better passer of the basketball than Keontae George. He defends better than both of those guys as well, pretty significantly. I think for Utah specifically here, this is a significant upgrade to your long-term point guard, lead guard position. He's got great positional size. He sees both the strong side and weak side of the floor very, very well. And I think this is a very, very, very good selection for the Utah Jazz at pick number 2. Moving on to pick number 3, and I think for Washington here specifically, we've seen them at the top of the mock very, very consistently this year, obviously when I do the draft order by standings, and then even once I believe that they won the first overall pick in one of my lottery simulations this year too. So we haven't really had the opportunity to talk about Washington if they don't have a top 2 pick very much this year, but I think this is an interesting case study on how Will Dawkins, how Michael Winger want to build this team. What is the image that they have for this team moving forward? And a lot of the times when I've mocked Cooper Flagg first overall to Washington, I've talked about the defensive side of the ball and how they have a lot of really strong infrastructural pieces already with Alex Sarr, who's going to be one of the more scheme versatile big men in the NBA moving forward, in my opinion, on the defensive end of the floor. Bilal Coulibaly, who obviously is pretty scheme versatile, has a ton of length, and I think his core muscle strength is getting a little bit stronger as well to be a better on-ball defender. He's very, very intriguing long-term as a defensive prospect. So now third overall, they could either look for a creation bet, although they did take a couple of guards last draft in Bub Carrington and Keyshawn George. Specifically, Carrington is the one who brings some of that on-ball creation. They still have Jordan Poole's contract that they're harboring as well. Or they could look kind of elite athlete, defensive side of the ball, and that's what I have them doing here, third overall, taking VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor. And he is one of my favorite defensive prospects to watch in this draft for a plethora of reasons. First of all, he's got the hip fluidity and the mirror skills. And when I mean mirror, what I mean is his ability to keep his shoulders in line, square or parallel with his matchups, and his ability to flip his hips, change direction, and really stay in front of the basketball. I'm a big KBIF believer when it comes to a coaching perspective. And by KBIF, I mean keep ball in front. If you at the point of attack can keep the ball in front of you, keep your shoulders and chest between your man and the hoop, you're going to tend to have a lot of success as a defender. Now, NBA players are so skilled. The step back jump shot specifically really does beat KBIF because of the ability to create space backward, right? You're opening up that space after getting downhill a little bit. Even if you get cut off, you can still work backward and get your shot off. And that's something that, even the best defenders are liable to at times. But for someone like VJ Edgecombe, it's not just his mirror skills on the point of attack. It's also his ability to be a very disruptive gap defender with how quick, athletic he is. There's moments where he just seemingly pops up out of nowhere on film, and that's one of my favorite things watching him. And then also defensively, when he's the low man rotation guy, you think about some of his defensive transition capabilities and offensive transition abilities. If you go back to like the first game of the season where he dunked on Mark Few's kid, he is extremely athletic. He gets off the floor very, very quickly. And all of that really does impress me quite a bit. He had a 19.2% assist rate this year, which is actually pretty good. It's not as gaudy as Dylan Harper's 27% assist rate. But what Edgecombe does have is nearly a 4% steal rate, which is very, very good, especially in this draft class. Stands out as a pretty significantly high number at this point. Obviously, some guys are still finishing up their college seasons as we're in the Final Four now. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the NCAA tournament, by the way. Make sure to leave a comment down below how much you've been enjoying March Madness. I'd love to see what your guys' thoughts are on how the games have played out so far this March. But VJ Edgecombe nonetheless gives Washington another infrastructural piece defensively, someone who can make up space, defend out in space, and then offensively, it's still a work in progress for me at this point in time. The shooting has been kind of streaky, started the year a little slow, really caught fire throughout the middle, second half of the season a little bit. But I'm not completely sold on him as a jump shooter shot maker yet. And the handle has a little bit of ways to go. But we've seen definitely enough flashes where I think he's going to warrant a top 5 pick. Now remember, this is not my big board. This is not the order I would draft these kids. But this is what I would expect these teams to do in this situation, which is what makes the lottery simulation aspect very, very important in this mock draft as well. Let's move on to pick number 4 here now, where we have the Portland Trailblazers now making this selection. And Portland's been a really difficult team to mock for all draft cycle long, in my opinion, with them being likely anywhere between like pick 8 and pick 12. It's hard because you kind of want to go best player available. They've been a more competitive team this season. You want to put the right infrastructural pieces on your roster around Scoot Henderson, around Shaedon Sharpe, around Donovan Clingan. And at pick 8 to 12-ish, it's kind of hard to find exactly who that guy is. If they move up in the lottery like they do here in this video, this just screams upside swing to me. For Portland, I could definitely see Mike Schmitz, Joe Cronin in that front office looking at who could be the long-term ceiling raiser, who could be a very dominant offensive force for them off of the wing. So 4th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers here selecting Ace Bailey out of Rutgers. Now, do I think he's going to be a dominant offensive force in the NBA? I do not believe that myself. But do teams still believe that at this point in time? I definitely think there is still a significantly perceived upside for Ace Bailey. Now, is he going to be a top 2 pick in the 2025 NBA draft? No, and to begin the cycle before he had played a single minute of college basketball, that was a very real possibility. At this point in time, I think that door has closed. Dylan Harper significantly outperformed him this season. Dylan Harper will be drafted before Ace Bailey. I'm very, very certain of that. But Ace Bailey is still someone who is going to be very, very pleasantly looked at by NBA teams because of his natural size. He's about 6'9". Teams are going to envision him as a shooting guard or small forward. Obviously, other people are going to look at his size and say, well, that's a power forward. That's, I'm telling you right now, he plays like a wing. He's going to play like either an off-ball guard or a small forward, specifically with his physicality. But I think that's where you can carve out some advantage from him. The fact that he's as tall as he is and extremely athletic gives him a lot of functionality. Now, from an actual statistical profile this year, he has not been very, very good at all. His block rate, 4.1%, pretty good. That's one of the big positives. His turnover rate actually wasn't even that bad, just 11%, but his assist rate was horrendous at just 8.3%. Assisted turnover rate well below 1.0, so he's turning the ball over more often than he isn't. And when it comes to getting assists specifically, he's just not been reliable, but he was a pretty significant scorer this year, averaging about 18 points per game, averaged over 7 rebounds a night, so that's where some of that functional athleticism stands out. The true shooting percentage wasn't great, a little bit under 54%. That comes as a product of his shot diet, of course. And one thing that really does concern me Rutgers was not good when he was on the floor. He had a negative net rating this season, which out of the top 4 guys to go, he's the only one with a negative net rating, and in fact, he's the only one with a net rating worse than 8. So take that as you will. Rutgers was not very good with him on the court this season, but he is still a long-term projection piece here for Portland, and one that, when you look at his actual skills, tools, and traits, he's very tall, athletic, and if you believe you can develop that footwork, he has the shot-making potential to be a dangerous half-court, end of shot clock, end of game. Get this guy the ball, get out of his way, let him play one-on-one, and shoot the ball over the top of his defender. And at the end of the day, basketball is about putting the ball in the hoop. Ace Bailey is very naturally skilled in that one specific area. Now, he does come with a heavy dose of other flaws, other areas that are going to be preventative from him being a superstar in the NBA. But there is some real talent here, and if Portland feels like they can harness that kind of player and develop that kind of player around their nucleus of other really good young supporting pieces like Klingon, who's a playmaking hub, like Scoot Henderson, who is a still long-term, very intriguing drive and kick guy, there's a lot to love here for what Portland's got going on, and they already have kind of their wing core with Toumani Camara being the headliner there for that. Ace Bailey's that upside swing for Portland that I definitely would see them taking if they move up into the top 4 in the 2025 NBA draft. Pick number 5, the Charlotte Hornets here now, and I know Hornets fans might be devastated if they move down in the draft when it comes to the actual IRL, in real life lottery. But I'm going to say to Hornets fans, don't worry. Picking at number 5, picking at number 6 might not be the worst case outcome for you here, specifically with the depth of this draft, how strong I think the top 10 of this draft is. Specifically, being at pick 5 could still be a very good outcome for Charlotte, especially with who is still on the board. 5th overall, I have the Charlotte Hornets here selecting Khaman Maluach from Duke, and this is a player who might return top 3 value in this draft class. I am really teetering, so I have not released a big board yet, but here's a little bit of an insight. I am very, very high on Khaman Maluach, and I think that a player like this, especially if you look at how Duke has been defensively this season, you look at how the game against Alabama went in the Elite 8, where the Crimson Tide could just not score at the rim, missed numerous layups, missed numerous floaters, and the common denominator in that equation was Khaman Maluach's presence around the rim. Now, is there a lot of room for him to grow defensively in terms of an IQ positioning standpoint? Obviously, you'd love to see him be a little bit more flexible out on the perimeter. Now, he isn't someone who's terrible in those areas, but I do think he does drop his top foot pretty easily. I think he does give up driving lanes when he is guarding on the perimeter. You'd like to see him move those puppies a little bit better left and right instead of downhill, which he obviously does rely on his length and size and shot blocking a lot in some of those isolation and perimeter defensive moments. So he's kind of ushering guys to the rim just to try and meet them there and beat them there. And he is capable of doing that. But really, if you're drafting Khaman Maluach, what you're looking for is a defensive anchor who's going to sit around the rim and really deter any scoring at the rack. Now, in the Eastern Conference, that's not super easy because of the presence of the shooting big men over there with Karl Anthony Towns in New York. You've got Miles Turner in Indiana. You've got Kristaps Porzingis in Boston. You've got Joel Embiid, who obviously can shoot the ball and play out of the mid-range area and is very productive in that kind of area of the floor as well. So Khaman Maluach winning at the rim isn't just the name of the game in the Eastern Conference for big men, but it is a huge step forward for the Charlotte Hornets specifically. Think back to earlier this year when they had Nick Richards playing high minutes. Mark Williams has obviously struggled, especially this season on the defensive end of the floor. The Hornets need someone who can be a defensive culture setter for them and can really help them anchor down the middle of their defense. Now, for Hornets fans saying, hey, we still have Mark Williams, look at some of the best teams in the NBA. They have 48 minutes of very good big man play. You think about Boston. What do they have? Oh, Al Horford, who's still one of the best aging players in the NBA. You have Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, Luke Kornet's giving them good minutes. You look at Cleveland. Well, they maybe have the best front court in the NBA with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. They also have Dean Wade. They've got a plethora of big men who can play significant minutes for them. You look at Minnesota a year ago with Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, and Naz Reid. You look at just a variety of teams, right? Oklahoma City this year with Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. The two of them have meshed even better than I thought they would have. And obviously, there was no denying how talented OKC was individually. It's not surprising that they've been the best team in the Western Conference this year. You need big men to win in the NBA. This is one thing that, the 2018-2019 Houston Rockets with their small ball efforts, having your best skilled players on the floor is always a good idea. But there's a reason you'd prefer a 6'9" point guard to a 6'1" point guard. And that is because size matters. It always has and it always will in the NBA. I think even if the Hornets do keep Mark Williams, having two really good centers is good for your team long term. 48 minutes of good center play is always a good thing. Or you can look at moving on from Mark Williams like they already had almost done in the trade with the Los Angeles Lakers, and Khaman Maluach can be the long-term center of the future for this team, regardless of what happens with LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller long-term as well. But I do think one thing I also want to touch on here, Maluach is a very good screen setter. Screen assists are the most underrated thing in all of basketball. No one talks about it. Media never covers it. Khaman Maluach sets a ton of screens. He sets very good screens. He rolls extremely hard to the rim. People will talk about the lobs. People will talk about the catch radius. All of those things deserve love too. But it really starts at the very mesh point, at the point of attack, where when he sets a good screen, it frees up Knueppel to get to the rim. It frees up Cooper Flagg to hit him on a roll after their switch has already occurred. And that's where Khaman Maluach is going to bring value to Charlotte, regardless of who else is on the floor there with him moving forward. Pick number 6, the New Orleans Pelicans are a very, very interesting team to mock for here. Obviously, they have not had the season that you would hope for them to have. But, looking at the overall team context here specifically for the Pelicans, they do have a lot of things that they could look at addressing here, specifically with this pick. After trading Brandon Ingram, we saw Trey Murphy III kind of break out in a big way. One of the most underrated players in the entire NBA right now. Unfortunately, he's out for the year. But if you're looking at the current situation for New Orleans, I still think big man is a spot that I would look at. And for me specifically, the one that really stands out at this spot in the draft is Derik Queen from Maryland. And the reason Derik Queen stands out for me here specifically is if you look at who's been the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Pelicans, something you don't really hear much in the NBA, but I think it's a really big deal here. It is James Borrego, the former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. And what has Borrego really brought to New Orleans? He's brought a ton of zoom action, a ton of dribble handoff action. Last week I talked about Derik Queen fitting into a Jordi Fernandez offense for the Brooklyn Nets with the usage of dribble handoffs and the ability to drive off the top of the key, play out of the face-up game, something Derik Queen is extremely, extremely gifted at. I really love Derik Queen's game. There's a few numbers I need to throw at you here. So not only was he productive in your traditional box score, 16.5 points, 9 rebounds a game as a freshman. Remember, he had a 2020 game, his very first game of the season. He also was productive on the defensive end of the floor, averaging over 1 steal and 1 block per game. Pretty decent steal rate, very good block rate. Well, not very good, but an okay block rate at 4%, roughly. Now, his assist percentage wasn't great, but true shooting percentage, very good. 59% as a true shooter, specifically with how kind of perimeter-centric his game can be at times. I still thought that number was very promising, and part of why that number was so good, he has a dominant free throw rate. A 0.546 free throw rate, which is just incredible. Remember, I talked about Dylan Harper having a very good free throw rate. Harper's was 0.419. So you're looking at Derik Queen getting to the free throw line about 10% more frequently than Dylan Harper does, which is very, very, very impressive. And for a big man, that is what screams star potential here, specifically with his ability to handle the rock. There's some real shot-making chops here long-term from a developmental standpoint. I think he processes the game very well. That's one of the times where I look at the numbers and I say, okay, well, I don't think the numbers really back up what I'm seeing on the court here. Yes, his assist percentage wasn't great, but I think his ability to process the court, read what's happening, pass it to the open guy, and sometimes that's why assist rate isn't a great stat, because you make a pass to a wide-open shooter. If he doesn't make it, well, your assist rate's not going to go up. But he is someone who is still, I think, reading the floor very well. And I think when he gets to the NBA, having more talent around him, more athleticism specifically, I think the two-man combination between him and Zion Williamson is going to be very, very, very fun. And I know some Pelicans fans are going to say, well, we don't really need a center. We drafted Yves Missi. Well, first of all, I think Queen has a little bit of positional flexibility where he can maybe play the 4 at times next to Missi. But I also, just like I mentioned with the Charlotte Hornets, 48 minutes of good center play is a very good thing in the NBA. Another example of that, the Dallas Mavericks. They're obviously indexed very heavily on big men play right now after the Luka Doncic trade, but you look at how good they became last year when they acquired Daniel Gafford, when they added in PJ Washington, got more athletic, got bigger into their front court. There was a ton of beneficial ramifications from those trades. So I think the more bigs you can have, the better. The more talented bigs, even better than that. And I think the Pelicans here are very happy walking out with a big man, 6th overall in Derik Queen. At pick number 7 now, we have the Brooklyn Nets here. And this is one of those kind of tricky spots for me in the mock draft right now, where there's a lot of different players I would love to mock for Brooklyn, but I'm not exactly sure which way they could go. And I really love the idea of giving them a big man, whether it be Khaman Maluach or Derik Queen. With both of them off the board here, I can't go that direction. I cannot really project a Nick Claxton trade without one of those two guys on the board. So this is a weirder spot for Brooklyn, but I think talent upside here and real, movement shooter skill set is extremely important, especially for a team like Brooklyn, who has done a very good job creating shots for outside perimeter shooters this year. You think about the success Cam Johnson's had, the success Dorian Finney-Smith had to begin the year as a shooter. Those are kind of more stationary players. If you give them a better off-ball mover, someone who has very good lift on his jump shot and shoots the ball off of movement at a very good clip, you're going to get an impressive offensive weapon here for Jordi Fernandez. So 7th overall of the Brooklyn Nets here, selecting Trey Johnson out of Texas. And not really surprising here at this point in time. Now, there are some significant red flags in his overall prospect profile. You look at someone who scores the ball as prolifically as he does, you might be saying, why is this player not a top 3, top 4 pick in the draft? Well, he shot 45% on twos this season, which is not very good at all. And that was a real dampener on his overall true shooting percentage this season, where he shot a little bit under 56% from a true shooting standpoint. But there is still a lot to love. And the lot to love really starts from his three-point rate. 42% of his shots were threes this year, and he made 40% of them. Almost 7 3-point attempts per game. Very, very impressive three-point volume. The shot making is absurd, whether it be running off of screens, catching, getting his feet set, getting on balance, and rising up and knocking down perimeter jump shots, or when it comes to creating off the dribble himself, whether it be playing out of high pick and roll. We've seen him hit pull-up threes out of that. We've also seen him win in isolation a little bit. There's a very good basis here of scoring upside, scoring potential, specifically outside of the three-point line. And with how three-point centric the NBA has become, everyone sits here and complains about it and says this, that, and the other thing, but then when it comes to drafting, they don't value guys who can shoot the three-point shot. I don't understand it. Trey Johnson can shoot the three-point shot. He's one of the best three-point shooters in this draft, if not just flat out the best one when it comes to his overall profile. Some guys have higher three-point percentages than him, but not a lot come with the difficulty degree of shot making talent that he has. Obviously, you look at Kobe Bryant from Kentucky as another guy who kind of mirrors that same either volume and difficulty. But honestly, Kobe Bryant is probably a better three-point shooter, but he's also significantly older than Trey Johnson. So Trey Johnson has some of those athletic tools. He's got pretty solid positional size. He's a respectable athlete, someone who I think when it comes to stepping into the NBA day one, very, very easily projectable into a role as a movement shooter for an offense. And when it comes to scoring gravity, when it comes to putting defenses in a bind, if Trey Johnson's standing in the corner, if he's standing off the break, you're not going to want to leave this guy open. That's just flat out the reality. You're not going to want to help off of him super aggressively. So having this guy in the three-point line can kind of open up the court spacing. The Nets are going to have cap space to work with this offseason. They have 4 first-round picks in this mock draft. The Nets could be a team that really readily improves quickly this offseason, kind of like how we saw the Houston Rockets a few years ago. Draft a whole bunch of guys in the first round, go out, spend money on Dillon Brooks, Fred VanVleet, and really drastically improve their team very quickly. Brooklyn could take a meaningful step forward if they decide to use their cap space and they draft well this offseason as well. Pick number 8, the Toronto Raptors here now at this spot in the draft. I think, again, another team that I would have really envisioned as either a Derik Queen or Khaman Maluach landing spot. Obviously, both of those guys, again, off the board at this point. And I think you're seeing the value of size specifically in this draft class right now. I think Maluach and Derik Queen really provide a ton of upside and a ton of value to teams drafting in the top 10 this year. So both of them go off the board relatively early. Now, I kind of felt the same way about Donovan Clingan last year. I feel like his play in limited minutes this year for Portland has really backed up my position on him and my perspective on him. But remember, he did kind of get underdrafted relative to where I expected him to get drafted. And Queen and Maluach, well, Maluach might end up winning a national title this year. We'll see what happens with the Duke Blue Devils. But Derik Queen's already eliminated. You think about Clingan, who was a 2-time national champion, still got underdrafted a little bit. So it wouldn't be shocking if the Bigs fell a little bit further than I have them in this mock draft. So maybe Toronto could still be in play. But in this draft, in this mock draft specifically, I think the value of the size was really prevalent for both New Orleans and Charlotte. But 8th overall here, I have the Toronto Raptors going with guard Kasparas Jakucionis from Illinois. And this is a player where I think there is a lot to really like in his overall statistical profile. And we've talked about that, right? We've talked about his ability to make reads on the fly where he's playing off of a live dribble. Had a 26% assist rate this year. That's a very, very good percentage. His assist to turnover rate was relatively good at 1.27. You know, I know people are going to say, well, he turns over the ball way too much. And that definitely has been a cause of concern as of late. Finished the year on a pretty bad turnover stretch. But I do think, just looking at his overall skill set, one, Illinois really relied on him to create efficient offense. In the NBA, he's going to be a cog in the offensive machine rather than the offensive machine. And I think that's going to be an important thing to remember. Do I see mega superstar potential here with Kasparas Jakucionis? No, I do not. And I never really have this entire process because he really cannot reliably beat his defender one-on-one off the dribble. This is something Toronto already kind of struggles with a little bit in terms of their overall collection of talent. But Jakucionis, one thing he does very, very well is he shoots a lot of threes. He shoots them at a pretty respectable rate. He was effective this year, averaged 15, 6, and 5. Now, yes, the turnovers were still a problem, but three-point attempt rate was really good. Free throw rate was pretty good. He wins off of stride stops. He wins off of balance, playing off of 2 feet. He has had game winners this year for the Fighting Illini where he gets cut off on his drive, but then goes to a stride stop, hits a turnaround jump shot for game. There's been moments that I've really liked. His usage rate, honestly, not incredibly high, 24%. But again, usage rate's not necessarily the best barometer for how often he has the ball. But keep that in mind, right? He had a positive net rating this year, a little bit under 7 for a Fighting Illini team that was pretty competitive, a team that pushed in the NCAA tournament a little bit. I think for Toronto specifically here, if you're looking at a player who has upside still to grow into, being kind of this hybrid on-ball, off-ball player who can create off the catch or out of the pick and roll, pick and pop game would be really, really dynamic. Now, I think for Toronto to really unlock Jakucionis, they would still need some version of a stretch big man in order to really turn his talents into a weapon for them. The more shooting around Jakucionis, the better. It gives you guys who can set screens for him. He can, play out a play against switches, or you can ultimately look at him attacking drop coverage, which is, again, very prevalent in the Eastern Conference. You pair him up with the stretch big man, you're going to be cooking with some gas for sure. So for Toronto here, this is a player who I still think does have some upside, even though I don't believe it to be mega superstar upside. He's still someone who can grow and blossom into a good starting point guard in the NBA in the not so distant future. Pick number 9, the San Antonio Spurs here now. And I'm not going to overcomplicate things. I'm not going to overthink this spot in the draft. I'm going the exact same route I did last week. 9th overall, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting Knueppel, wing guard from Duke. This kid's just good at basketball. He's going to be overlooked. People are going to ask, and predominantly because he's white, they're going to ask, is he athletic enough to play in the NBA? Yes, the answer to that is overwhelmingly yes. Sure, he doesn't have a 48-inch vertical, but what he does do is play off of 2 feet. He's got very good core balance. He's strong. He can play out of bumps, and anyone who's actually played basketball will understand the value of those things, right? The most athletic guys aren't always just the ones who can jump and get their head up to the rim. It's the guys who can move in tight spaces. It's guys who have the coordination and balance to be very, very good in tight areas. And Knueppel has all of that. He's a very productive off 2-foot player, and he's very decisive. And I think that decisiveness is one thing that really, really stands out to me about him as a prospect. He doesn't just settle, and he understands, like, again, I talked about this last week. When he has the basketball, the number one thing on the scouting report is going to say capital S shooter. Teams are going to try and run him off the three-point line. Teams are going to try and take away his airspace. They're going to try and make him uncomfortable on the perimeter. And that's where having a good rip through, having a good decisive kind of processing skill, which is what Knueppel has, is very beneficial in his ability to attack downhill, get to the rim. We've seen him float up several lobs this year as well to Khaman Maluach. So I think there's some playmaking tools to unlock there. Now, I'm not saying he's ever going to be a point guard, a lead guard. I'm not even saying he's going to be your secondary playmaker. I don't believe that, but I think he can be a really additive, connective piece for an offense. And I think if you're looking at what San Antonio currently has on their roster, starting at the very top with Victor Wembanyama, hope to God he can come back healthy and play out his career just like normal, like we would all hope to see. And then you have De'Aaron Fox, right? You have your two, heads of the snake, so to speak, or you have your two star players. You don't need another guy who's going to carry a 30% usage rate. You're not going to need a guy who needs to dribble the ball 6 or 7 times to be effective. You need someone who's decisive. You need someone who can shoot, but can also attack closeouts effectively, play make. And think about it. If Knueppel can throw lobs to Khaman Maluach in college, he's definitely going to be able to throw them to Victor Wembanyama in the NBA. This is the kind of player that fits very, very well next to a Wembanyama. This is the kind of player that, in my opinion, is going to fit very, very smoothly next to a De'Aaron Fox. This is a no-brainer pick for San Antonio. If Knueppel's on the board at pick number 9 for the Spurs and they don't take him, I will be very disappointed. This is a home run selection for the Spurs at pick 9, one that makes their team both now and long-term significantly better for the future. Pick number 10, the Chicago Bulls here now, a team that, again, I think with kind of their recent streak of play, you think about Kobe White winning multiple, Player of the Week awards. He's been very, very good, especially in the second half of the season this year. Honestly, throughout a majority of the season, he's been a very, very good guard for the Bulls. The shot making, the scoring has been very, very impressive. And then Josh Giddey has really turned a corner in the second half of the year as well. You think about the game winner against the Los Angeles Lakers, right? Hold that follow through. He's been impressive for the Bulls. Everyone was really, really hard on them for the Caruso-Giddey trade. I didn't love it. I still don't necessarily love it for the Bulls, but I didn't hate it as much as everybody else did. I think I gave them a B- grade. And remember, a lot of people were giving them D's and F's for that decision. And, there is some ramifications. I still stand by my B- grade because even with Josh Giddey playing well, this Bulls team still finds themselves in a mediocre position. And now they're going to have to extend Josh Giddey. Is he going to get $120 to $140 million on his next 4-year contract? That's a lot of money to give Josh Giddey. But nonetheless, the Bulls, I think internally they at least feel like they have their backcourt of the future. So we're going to look for a connective, additive piece around that. And that player is forward Collin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. What an interesting prospect profile. Now, we've talked about the skills a lot on the channel. Obviously, a lot of my draft coverage is skills-centered because that's really what you need to know about these prospects. What can they do? What tools do they have? How do they fit into certain team contexts? And we've talked about Collin Murray-Boyles. Defensively, he makes a lot of plays. Event creation rate's pretty good. Someone who understands what he's doing positionally off the ball to be either a gap defender helper or to be on the ball and versatile enough to defend out in space. Obviously, we've talked about his back to the basket game a bit this year. We've talked about his playmaking where he feels the court pretty well. All of those things stand out to me. But one thing I do want to talk about, and it really does stand out to me in a big way. There's two things. I talked about Derik Queen's free throw rate. Collin Murray-Boyles basically has the exact same statistical profile as Derik Queen, who was a top 6 pick in this mock draft, right? Collin Murray-Boyles, 55% free throw rate, which is crazy. Usage rate was pretty much the exact same as Derik Queen's. And then the other thing that really stands out to me, so South Carolina was terrible this year. On the season, their team had a negative net rating. Collin Murray-Boyles, when he was on the court this year, was a plus 19.2. I talked second overall about Dylan Harper making Rutgers quite a bit better than their actual team was. I Talked about Ace Bailey at pick number 4 having a negative net rating. When Collin Murray-Boyles was on the court, South Carolina was outscoring their opponent by 20 points per 100 possessions. He made a bad team look very good when he was on the floor. And I think for Chicago specifically here, this is a player that can fit in as a connective piece around their core nucleus. Now, last week, this was the same mock pick for them last week. I talked about the value of Nikola Vucevic's shooting, making Collin Murray-Boyles work. Now, just because Collin Murray-Boyles was a great college player doesn't mean it's going to translate day one of his NBA career. I do think the infrastructure pieces around him will matter a lot. I'm not sure about the long-term fit between CMB and Josh Giddey, but I do think playmaking is at a premium in the NBA. You look at some of the best teams. Boston, ton of playmaking. Minnesota has a whole bunch of guys who can play make off the dribble with DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker a little bit, Mike Conley. Obviously, they drafted Dillingham. Last year, they had Karl Anthony Towns. You think about Oklahoma City. A whole bunch of guys who can put the ball on the deck and make decisions. Now, it's not their greatest attribute, but they have a plethora of players who can make those kinds of decisions. It's not just heliocentric ball in OKC, although at times it can be, and for good reason, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the MVP of the league. So the more playmaking chops, the better. And I think guys who can dribble, pass, shoot are very, very valuable. Now, there's a big question mark right now on the shooting component for CMB. But the dribbling and passing is for sure there, especially given his size and kind of unique prospect profile as a two-way player who is kind of an undersized 4-5 combo. Like, he's just an interesting player. And I think for Chicago specifically, you're taking a swing on a guy who is just good at basketball. Moving on now to pick number 11, the Miami Heat here now. With this pick being lottery protected, they have the ability to add in some extra talent. And I have them going with guard Jeremiah Fears, another very high assist rate guard this year. I think specifically if you're looking at the long-term upside of Jeremiah Fears, you are envisioning him as a high-volume pick-and-roll ball handler. Now, that sounds status quo for a lot of you. You're going to hear that and say, oh, well, okay, obviously. But there is a little bit of a detriment with how prevalent ball screens have become in the NBA in the last 10 years or so. More and more teams have become more effective at defending ball screens. And pick and roll basketball is actually one of the lesser efficient play types in recent years from an offensive component. So if you are drafting Jeremiah Fears and you're going to put him in a ton of high ball screens, teams know what's coming. They know how to try and best defend this. This is what their practice reps really focus on. A lot of team defensive ideologies center around, hey, how are we guarding the pick and roll? Because it's such a prevalent form of NBA basketball. So with Jeremiah Fears, there are some problems and concerns of mine that do arise because of that. He's a 28% three-point shooter. Yes, he had some really big moments. He had some really incredible shots this year from three, and I do think he has kind of that gamer clutch mentality to him where he's going to rise up in the big moments, which is what you love to see from prospects. But at the same time, the overall body of work wasn't great for him as a three-point shooter. That's a concern for me. You also look at what he does when he's off the ball. Again, you're envisioning him as this high-volume ball handler. Well, what happens when Tyler Hero has the ball? What happens when Bam Adebayo is playing with the basketball? How is Jeremiah Fears impacting winning when he doesn't have the rock? And that's a huge concern for me still moving forward. So I think Miami here, yes, they're getting a point guard, which I think they definitely need. They're getting a talent upside swing here in Jeremiah Fears, which I do think long-term could play out very, very well for Miami. But I do have some concerns about him as an on-ball guard prospect coming into the NBA. There are a lot of concerns still for me at this point of the draft process. Pick number 12, the Houston Rockets here now. This pick comes from the Phoenix Suns. What a time to have the Phoenix Suns future draft picks, huh? But nonetheless, Houston at pick number 12. Here they are going to select forward Carter Bryant from Arizona. So now, more likely than not, I do think the Rockets will look to trade this pick on draft night. They just do not have a lot of room in their rotation right now. So either trading this pick out for future draft capital from another team, which could be a very interesting decision for them, or involving it in some kind of trade for a star if they decide to go that route, would be very beneficial. But in this mock draft, if they do stick and pick, I have them going with an athletic forward in Carter Bryant. And this is really kind of getting ahead of the cost of losing players. You look at Jason Tate, who very well could leave in free agency. They might lose him. They're going to start to lose players off this roster, especially with the new CBA, when they start to have to extend some of these young guys. They already did so with Şengün and Jalen Green. Their roster is going to get expensive pretty quickly. So we're looking at cheap labor, young talent. who can play off the ball. And Carter Bryant had one of the lowest usage rates among all first-round caliber prospects this year. He's predominantly an off-ball player. That's pretty much all he does. But he shoots the ball really well, shot about 37% from 3 this season, and then also cuts really well. He's extremely athletic, and he's got a big, long, strong frame. He looks like an NBA player. He's built like an NBA player. Now, I think from an actual, is he ready to contribute perspective? No. I think Houston would need pretty significant minute upticks from Reed Sheppard and Cam Whitmore before anything happens with Carter Bryant in their rotation. But this is a option here for Houston to get a young player under contract on their roster moving forward who can be, kind of their 9th, 10th guy right now in the rotation, where he's not going to play very much right away, which is okay. He's going to spend a lot of time in Rio Grande playing G League basketball, and again, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Even for lottery picks, it's a really good developmental tool to give them opportunities to grow. I think Carter Bryant, specifically from a skill set perspective, still has a lot of room to grow. Very typically, I'm against having a player play with the ball in their hands a lot in the G League if you're not projecting them to play in that kind of role in the NBA. I think it could be a very good beneficial tool, though, for Carter Bryant to work on his skills on the perimeter, work on his handle a little bit, get more comfortable with the ball in his hands. I think that will kind of well round out his game. I think going forward for a team like Houston, that could be very, very beneficial for them going forward. Pick 13, the Atlanta Hawks here now. This pick comes from the Sacramento Kings, part of the Kevin Huerter trade from a few years ago, one that I did not love for Sacramento. I got a lot of beef for that when that happened, but Kevin Huerter is now playing in Chicago, so you tell me. 13th overall here, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting guard Jase Richardson from Michigan State. The Spartan season did unfortunately end at the hands of Auburn yesterday, but I do think, specifically looking at Jase Richardson as a prospect, there is a lot to be intrigued with. The overall statistical profile is very, very promising for him, and I think when it comes to his actual success off of the ball and on the ball, he's someone who I think plays off of handoffs really well. It could be an interesting fit with Onyeka Okongwu if Quinn Snyder in Atlanta looks to play into that a little bit more, maybe more so with Jalen Johnson as a DHO guy. But then specifically playing off of Trae Young, Jase Richardson, I think would be a really interesting fit because Richardson's a player who can attack advantage well, attacks closeouts pretty well, plays balanced, and doesn't really overly exert himself into the offense too much. So I think for a team looking for more creation upside, more creation skills around Trae Young, Jase Richardson could be a player who fits into that equation without really being a detriment to what Trae Young brings you on at the same time, where Richardson can pretty easily coexist, in my opinion, moving forward with Trae Young, which is why I think Richardson is going to be one of the more easy slottable fits next to other talent in the NBA in this draft class, just because he's not someone who's going to demand the basketball, doesn't need it to be effective, compared to a Jeremiah Fears, who we talked about a couple picks ago for Miami. I think Richardson's a little bit of a safer prospect here for a team that already has established talent. And for Trae Young specifically, we've seen the high usage guard next to him. We saw what DeJounte Murray looked like. It didn't fit super great. So Jase Richardson, a little bit of a naturally lower usage rate kind of guard. I think just a little bit more projectable, predictable fit here with Atlanta next to Trae Young moving forward. And I think from a skill set, can shoot the ball well, drives and kicks, plays within himself, plays balanced, and does seemingly not really out of control too much. And I think even though the upside I don't think is immense with Jase Richardson, you look at players who their father played in the NBA, Jase Richardson, son of Jason Richardson. I just think there's a pretty good track record there of drafting kids who have lineage in the NBA, have heritage in the NBA. And Jase Richardson, not only does he check that box, he's also just a very good player, had a very productive college season as a freshman for Michigan State. Team had a very good year. He was not subtractive to them at all. He was a very additive player in that mix for them, and a very good player on a very good college team. And I think for Atlanta, if you're looking for a player to fit off of Trae Young, you're looking for talent, you're looking for good players who can fit. That's what Jase Richardson is really going to bring 13th overall to Atlanta. Pick number 14, my Dallas Mavericks here now. With Anthony Davis back in the lineup, this team has been winning some games. They're still undefeated when Anthony Davis plays, which is a pretty big testament to Anthony Davis's talent level. Now, still not in love with the trade, as you guys can tell, but 14th overall, the Dallas Mavericks here selecting Guard Bennett, Stirtz from Drake. And yes, listen, now you guys have to hear me here. We're at the point of the process where I'm not exactly sure who's going to officially declare, who's not going to declare for the NBA draft. Bennett Stirtz, I know he's transferring to Iowa. He could still technically enter his name in the NBA draft. And if he does, I do think he will get serious lottery looks. Bennett Stirtz has an incredible statistical profile, had a very, very productive season this past year for Drake. Now you might say, well, yeah, it's a mid-major, this, that, or the other thing. There's a bunch of reasons to, there's going to be a lot of people who question everything, right? But he had a 2.85 assist to turnover rate, which is very, very good. Averaged over 2 steals per game. He had a really gaudy assist percentage, 34.2% assist rate, which is just incredible. 61% true shooting percentage, 39.5% on threes, a 38.5% free throw rate. This is the type of player that the analytics just adore. And for teams and how analytics-centered draft communities become a little bit in recent years, like there's going to be a pretty significant amount of people who have Bennett Stirtz graded in or around the lottery. Now, he might not come out of the draft, right? He might stay at Iowa with his coach, Ben McCollum, who just got a new job there, right? Moving from Drake to Iowa. But Bennett Stirtz is a player who is going to draw lottery looks. Now, I don't know if he actually declares or not, but the statistical profile is great. He's a really fun player to watch play as well. He knows how to manipulate, navigate screens. And I think with the Mavericks losing a lot of offensive creation when they traded away Luka Doncic, if they're looking for someone to play out of middle pick and roll like they do with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic when the two of them are together, obviously you're going to look to be filling some of Kyrie's minutes as well. I think guard is a kind of foregone conclusion for the Mavericks in the draft here. If they do keep this pick, very possible they could still trade it, right? But if they do keep the pick and draft, Bennett Stirtz is someone who could fit next to Anthony Davis, fit next to Daniel Gafford, fit next to Derik Lively, be an additive piece for them, shoots the ball really well, was an analytics darling this past year. I think very good chance he ends up being a top 18-ish pick in the 2025 NBA draft if he actually does declare for the draft this year. Pick number 15, the San Antonio Spurs here. Very interesting team to continue talking about because they've already gone with Knueppel, so now you're kind of looking at dealer's choice here. What do the Spurs feel like internally they want to value? Could they look at another guard? I don't know. Just the fact that they have Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox makes it very unlikely that they do that, especially after drafting Knueppel now. There's just not really a huge need for that. They also still have Devin Vassell, so you kind of think your point guard, shooting guard of the future is kind of settled and solved there for San Antonio, which is great. That's a great thing. That's a great way to feel about your team moving forward. So I think we're going to look front court here, and that player 15th overall for San Antonio is going to be Noah Essengue from Ratiopharm Ulm. And Essengue is a player I continue to be a little critical of. I don't love his contact balance. As you can tell on the graphic, he's a very slim, wiry player. I don't think he has the great positional, functional play strength yet at this point. And I think his contact balance really suffers as a result of that. He doesn't play through contact very well. But what he does do is find open space and succeed in open space. He's a real advantage play finisher. In advantage, if you get the ball to Noah Essengue, he's probably going to score. Now, that means you need guys who can create advantage. Luckily for San Antonio, they already have those guys. They have Victor Wembanyama. They have De'Aaron Fox. They have guys who are going to draw a lot of attention already. So Essengue, if you're looking at him as kind of a finishing piece rather than a build-around piece for a team, that's where I think you're going to find success. I've seen some crazy comparisons from the draft community about Noah Essengue, and almost none of them I agree with. I think Noah Essengue is going to be a play finisher, not a play creator, not a play initiator, a play finisher. And I think for San Antonio, that is perfectly fine to project him into this kind of role for that team. He's got great length. He's got good positional size. I think defensively there's a lot of value he could provide next to Wembanyama, just having more length, size. We've talked about that. That's kind of been the theme of this mock draft so far, is the value of length and size in the NBA. Essengue brings that to San Antonio as a forward. And then also, as a play finisher, he can cut, finishes at the rim well. He's cut numerous lobs this year from Ben Seraph, his teammate there for Ratiopharm Ulm. And then also you look at him as a play finisher on the arc, shooting the three ball relatively well on open, unguarded jump shots. So I think the kind of volume and the kind of shots you're going to want him to take in the NBA are exactly what his skill set suggests he should be able to do. So I think 15th overall, Spurs walk away pretty happy here with Noah Essengue, all things considered. Pick number 16, the Orlando Magic, now at this spot of the draft. I think Orlando, a season that's been relatively disappointing. Now, obviously, they've battled so many injuries this year. They do have 2 picks in the first round in this mock draft. We'll see how they look to build up their roster. But 16th overall, I have the Orlando Magic here selecting center/forward Asa Newell out of Georgia. I think size, again, continues to be something that a team like Orlando specifically, who has been so heavily focused on adding sized players over the last few years. You think about drafting big jumbo forwards, right, with Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero. They drafted a very strong guard in Jalen Suggs, someone who had really great functional play strength for his position. Now you get Asa Newell, who has very good touch around the rim, has an absurd offensive rebounding rate. The Magic are getting a player here who can be additive to their offensive kind of construct as their team is currently built. And right now, Asa Newell, there's a lot of questions around him, but when he was on the court this year, Georgia had a 131.5 offensive rating, which is absurd. That is a nuclear offensive rating for a college basketball team. He doesn't turn the ball over, and he rebounds the actual heck out of the basketball. Averaged over 3 offensive rebounds per game this year as a big man for the Georgia Bulldogs. And I think specifically, there's some versatility defensively you're going to get with him as well. So for Orlando, they've found success kind of in a number of ways for the big man spot, right? They traded for Wendell Carter in the Nikola Vucevic trade. That's worked out pretty well for them, that trade has. It's been a real kind of building block trade, honestly. And then you also look at the decision to pick up Goga Bitadze, another former first-round pick. He's worked out extremely well for them. I think the Magic, they've done a good job finding talented bigs. I think Asa Newell would be another example of athletic, physical tools that project pretty well, and Orlando can get the most out of those guys. Jamal Mosley is a very good coach, knows how to build a team defense, and I think Asa Newell can help out their offense by getting on the offensive glass a bit more, keeping possessions alive, generating some of those second chance opportunities. Pick 17, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick via the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, first of all, I have to say it here. Let's hope for Damian Lillard to get back healthy. Want him to return to playing. The blood clot situation we have going on with some of the athletes right now is very, very concerning, very scary. We want everyone to be healthy. We want great basketball players to play basketball. So let's hope that Damian Lillard can recover and return very, very soon. And hopefully there's no long-term impact on his actual career because he's been such a great player for so long. But 17th overall, the Brooklyn Nets here select forward Liam McNeeley out of UConn. And earlier I talked about the value of shooting, specifically for a team like Brooklyn, who has done such a great job generating good quality looks for some of their spot-up guys. And I think Dorian Finney-Smith's really the example here I want to point to, where he shot about 45% on threes earlier this year before being traded from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. And I think if you're looking at Liam McNeeley, I know there's a lot of questions right now, kind of a slow-footed wing. It's going to be kind of a challenge for him to guard out in space a little bit. There are a lot of things Liam McNeeley does extremely well, though. Some of those things include rebounding the ball for his position. He's impactful, gets on the glass relatively well. What else does he do historically really well? Shoot the three ball. Now, I know this year it didn't really shoot it great for UConn, about 33% from three, but you go back to his time at Montverde Academy as an example, playing off of Cooper Flagg, playing off of Derik Queen, playing off of that loaded roster that had Asa Newell as well. That Montverde Academy team was incredible. One of the best high school teams we've seen in recent memory for sure. Liam McNeeley was a huge part of that. He was their zone breaker, could stand around numerous parts of the arc and really stretched out defenses. When teams went zone against them, it felt like Liam McNeeley was shooting a wide open three pretty much every single time. And when he was playing off of other creation, I think specifically for UConn this year, one thing that they really lacked was reliable guard creation that opened up the game for their wings and forwards. And specifically Liam McNeeley, Alex Karaban, I think were two guys who drastically had their draft stock hurt this season by the lack of other talent on their roster when it came to a creation playmaking standpoint. Think about who UConn's lost over the last few years. Obviously Jordan Hawkins was such an elite scoring presence for them, but what else did they lose from last year's championship caliber team? Donovan Clingan, a very good passing, playmaking big man who set a ton of good screens and really was a dominant screen assist guy in college basketball. They also lost Tristan Newton, who was their long-term floor general point guard. They lost Stephon Castle, who, again, is another good playmaking guard who had control of the offense at certain points in time. UConn lost a lot of playmaking, and I think it really drastically impacted what happened with Liam McNeeley this year as a true freshman. We also saw it in Alex Karaban. His usage went up this year, and his success rate went down in a lot of other things. These players, McNeeley and Karaban, are NBA-built players because they're meant to be playing off the ball in a heliocentric offense built around somebody else. Now, Brooklyn at this point in time might not have that heliocentric guy quite yet, but remember, they have cap space. They have a ton of future draft picks. They're going to be loaded up to get one of those guys potentially at some point in time. Getting those infrastructural pieces like a Trey Johnson and a Liam McNeeley, like we've done in this mock draft for them, is a very, very good place to be given their current roster setup right now in Brooklyn. Pick number 18, the Utah Jazz here now. This pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves, and 18th overall. Again, the Jazz already having gone with Dylan Harper. You might think, well, they don't really need another playmaker. They don't need another guard. We're going to go with this kind of pseudo best player available. I'm not sure if he's the best player available on my board, but I think a lot of teams would perceive him this way. And this is an upside swing for sure by Danny Ainge. 18th overall of the Utah Jazz here, selecting guard/wing Egor Demon from BYU. So they keep the Brigham Young product there in Utah. And I think specifically what they're really looking to do here is harness his playmaking as an off-ball player. And that's going to be a tricky thing to do. Egor Demon did not shoot the ball very well this season from three. Really struggles with contact. Doesn't play with great verticality above the rim. There's a lot of question marks with Egor Demon. There really is. What he is, though, is a very, very, very good passer. You know, I talked about assist rate a lot in this video. Egor Demon has a 34.6% assist rate. He also comes with a 22% turnover rate. So he's kind of a high leverage playmaker where when he makes certain passes, it's going to lead to a great opportunity to score, or it's going to end up in the hands of the other team. That's a problem right now. This is a developmental pick for Utah specifically. And listen, Jazz fans are going to know Demon very well there in state. They probably watched a ton of his college games. They know what he offers. They know what he doesn't offer. Again, I think the inability to play into contact, the inability to handle ball pressure, I think there's a lot of concerns. Some people are projecting Egor Demon to be this jumbo point guard. I really don't see it. I don't think he can be a true point guard in the NBA. I don't think his handle is lively enough. I don't think his first step is quick enough. And then, you talk about the defensive component of that. Like, people want to romanticize the idea of, well, if he's your point guard, you can switch everything 1 through 5. First of all, no team can really realistically switch everything 1 through 5. That means you need 5 guys who can guard all 5 positions. There's not even 5 guys in NBA basketball who can guard all 5 positions. So that's not really going to work. And I don't even know if Egor Demon can really guard point guards himself. So if you're envisioning him as a point guard, some nights he's going to have to guard point guards. Can he really do that? Is he quick enough? Does he have the lateral mobility skills? Sure, he's got great length positionally if he is that point guard for you. But that's just about it. I don't know. I'm just not really sold on Egor Demon. I do think there's a lot of tools to work with. I really do specifically like his passing vision, and I like the velocity and accuracy with which he passes the basketball. Now, you can get into the decision making. Sometimes it's not always the correct decision to make, but he does put a lot of pressure on a defense with the kind of decisions he does make. So for Utah here, a team that I think needs more playmaking, needs more connectiveness, Egor Demon could be someone who does long-term make sense for them. I just don't know if this is a real additive piece for them, though, in terms of actually winning games within the next season or two around their young core nucleus of guys. Pick 19, the Minnesota Timberwolves here now. This pick comes from the Detroit Pistons through the New York Knicks. This pick's been traded a whole bunch, most recently in the Karl Anthony Towns trade. I wouldn't rule out Minnesota looking to trade it either. But 19th overall, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves here selecting guard Nolan Traore. The French prospect goes 19th overall. Now, he has struggled quite a bit from the floor this season. His true shooting percentage is in the mud. But there is still a lot to like from a skills perspective. He's got a very quick first step, can be someone who generates pretty consistent paint touches. And I think for Minnesota specifically, the reason I went with Nolan Traore here, despite a number of different prospects that I myself would maybe consider over Traore, just simply put, he is someone who can create offense for role men. And Rudy Gobert, I think, specifically look at some of the struggles Minnesota's had over the last few years. When they've been clicking, they've been involving Rudy Gobert effectively in the pick and roll, and when they've struggled, they have not effectively included Rudy Gobert offensively in the pick and roll. And I think Traore, with how often he can hit rollers, this makes sense. Obviously, you're going to have that French connection with Rudy Gobert, kind of the tutelage and take him under his arms kind of approach, which is what we could expect for someone who was such a leader for a long time on that French national team, alongside Nick Batum and Evan Fournier, of course. Rudy Gobert, I think, would welcome Nolan Traore quite a bit for both off the court and on the court reasons. And then when it comes to Minnesota specifically, yes, they went with Rob Dillingham last year. I think the point guard spot is kind of up in the air long term for Minnesota right now. Mike Conley, just one more year left on his deal after this season, I believe. So I think if you're the Wolves, you're looking for long-term options. Traore, they did pick up Tristan Newton as a two-way guy who I think could factor in long-term to Minnesota's plans. They do have Jalen Clark, who's kind of this hybrid combo guard, not really a true on-ball guard though. And Anthony Edwards is going to play with the ball a lot too, so it's not like they definitely need a point guard, but I still think they could use another one, and Traore kind of factors into that here at pick number 19 in this mock draft. Pick number 20, back to the Miami Heat, who went with Jeremiah Fears at pick number 11 earlier. At pick number 20 now, the Heat, with this pick coming from Golden State from the Jimmy Butler trade, have the ability to either build up their defense a little bit further, and you think about trying to match up with some of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, thinking about the value of size against Cleveland, thinking about the value of length against Boston and some of their star offensive talent that they have. I think the answer becomes pretty clear here for Miami. 20th overall, they select forward Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph, someone who is a bigger physical wing who can defend out on the perimeter. And I think big wings are kind of a dime a dozen. They don't come around often, but when they do, they kind of have similar replicable skill sets. Rasheer Fleming is someone who kind of fits into that mold pretty smoothly, right? Shoots the three ball at a pretty respectable rate. He's going to be an off-ball player in the NBA offensively, but what you're going to hope he can do is either be an on-ball defender against slower ball handlers or an impactful gap defender against teams who do not have, that apex type of wing like Boston does with Jason Tatum, for example. So against Cleveland, you might put Rasheer Fleming on Evan Mobley and then hope that you can switch things a little bit safer and have a little bit more length size on the floor, whereas against Boston, you're going to probably primarily put Fleming on one of either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown and ask him to guard one-on-one out in space. Now, for Fleming specifically, the upside I don't think is great here. Doesn't drive the basketball very well at all. He's not going to be this dominant on-ball player. There's really not offensive upside here to speak of. But we've seen Miami, we've seen Eric Spoelstra in the past find success with players who are offensively limited. Haywood Highsmith, I think, is a very good recent example of that. And even during the Heatles days, right? Like Joel Anthony was playing big minutes for some of those Heat teams as an example. So, you don't want to limit your team. You don't want to limit your team's offense by who you draft. But at the same time, if you're looking at it from a two-way perspective, Rasheer Fleming is someone who could definitely fit in without being a subtractive piece offensively by standing in the corner, knocking down open catch-and-shoot jump shots. And I think that's kind of what Miami would probably be looking to add here after drafting Jeremiah Fears in the lottery at pick number 11. Pick number 21, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now, probably devastated that Rasheer Fleming is off the board because he would fit in very, very smoothly for them. He is who I mocked them last week as a big physical defender, someone who could kind of bring a little bit more size into the perimeter defensive category than what OKC currently already has. But nonetheless, 21st overall, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder here selecting forward/center Danny Wolf. Earlier in this mock, I talked about OKC as a testament to one of those teams that has added size and it's worked out really well for them. With Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren together, those two guys have made music together, playing off of each other. The collection of length, size, when one of them's been injured, the other one's been able to step up in a big way. And I think the Thunder, just with how dominant of a season they have had, it's hard to look at and say, well, this is what this team needs. This is, again, cheap, cost-controlled contracts here. Drafting Danny Wolf, 21st overall, you're going to have him on a 4-year NBA rookie contract that's going to be very, very affordable, and it gives you depth at that front court spot. Jalen Williams, not the wing version, not J-Dub, but J-Will. They drafted him a few years ago. I think he's given them good minutes. Danny Wolf could maybe step into that role if Jalen Williams is looking to get paid, or if he's looking to find some kind of extension where, he's not, I'm not saying he's going to get $100 million on his extension, right? But if he's looking for $8 million a year, that number might be kind of a lot for what OKC is willing to give up, especially given how non-essential J. Will is for them moving forward. So Danny Wolf is a cheaper version of that, and honestly probably a better version too. Offensively, I think just more skilled than J. Will is. I think there's more in his bag when it comes to scoring the basketball, and then also I think his playmaking is a bit more lively, specifically the 45 action we've seen him run with a ton with Vlad Golden there in Michigan has been really good. So I think if you're looking at projecting a fit with him next to Holmgren or Hartenstein, I think it fits in pretty smoothly. And the Thunder have the best team defense in the NBA, basically. Like, they're so fun to watch as a team because of how good they are at the point of attack. Danny Wolf's big question would be how well he can guard in a team setting. If he's going to succeed anywhere, it would probably be Oklahoma City. So that's why this pick, I think, makes a ton of sense, both from a team perspective and also individually for Danny Wolf. This is a great situation for him to land in as well. Pick number 22, the Indiana Pacers here at this spot in the mock draft. Indiana is always a fun team to mock for. I like the way that their team is built. I'm a huge Tyrese Halliburton believer, always have been, always will be. I loved him at Iowa State. And now I think Indiana here, it's pretty easy to mock for them because they kind of have their infrastructure in place, right? They've got their stretch big man. Hopefully they keep Miles Turner there long term. They've got a hybrid forward who can do a whole bunch of things off the dribble and off the catch in Pascal Siakam. They have, their heliocentric player who has been a little less heliocentric this year in Tyrese Halliburton. But nonetheless, 22nd overall, the Indiana Pacers selecting wing Adu Thiero from Arkansas. Now, did miss the NCAA tournament. Kind of was out since, I believe, February 22nd, so missed, about a month of game action, unfortunately. But I liked what I saw from Thiero this year. Really, really big statistical improvements from him for where he was a year ago. You think about being a not prevalent player for Kentucky, wasn't getting a ton of minutes. Kind of a big breakout year for him, honestly. Averaged about 16 points per game. Was really effective. Actually, about 15 points per game. I'm looking over at my stat profile here. But what really stands out to me is his event creation rate defensively. Nearly a 3% block rate, which is really good for a wing. And then also a 3.5% steal rate, which stands out pretty big time as well. He just mucks up the gaps, gets into the passing lanes, and also digs in really, really well on drives as kind of that nearest gap defender. So I think for Indiana, if you're just looking to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit more functional defensively, Thiero is someone who can guard on the ball a bit, but really finds more of his success defending off the ball, which I think could be a really big benefit for Indiana. Now, the NBA is a different level of off-ball movement and spacing, so I do think maybe Thiero would have a little bit of learning to do. It's not like he steps in day one and is immediately this elite gap defender, but I think there's a lot of upside for him to be a very functional cutter off of Halliburton, a very functional team defender. And, for Pacers fans too, you're already sitting there probably screaming at the screen right now, Rick Carlisle doesn't play young guys anyway. So, listen, that's the kind of point here is if you draft a younger player and he needs a little bit of room to grow, that's A-okay, especially if Rick Carlisle is your head coach in the NBA. Moving on here now to pick number 23, the Washington Wizards. Back on the clock here, remember they went with VJ Edgecombe. 3rd overall, 23rd, I have them here selecting wing Will Riley out of Illinois. So I talked about the defensive side of the basketball at number 3, specifically with VJ Edgecombe. Now, he does bring some offensive upside as well. Will Riley brings some of that shot-making, shot creation potential that I think Washington would be very interested in adding into their roster. Specifically, Will Riley, when you go back to his high school tape and some of the promising moments from his Illinois tenure, what you really look at and what you really start to see is the evolution of a pull-up jump shot, and specifically his ability to take and make three-pointers is really what you're kind of hoping translates really, really well for him going into the NBA. Now, he wasn't the most productive player in college, only averaged about 12.5 points per game. His block rate, steal rate, both very low, but his turnover rate was pretty acceptable. Assist rate was actually surprisingly good at about 16% for him, which I thought was pretty surprising. Now, he didn't really connect a ton on his shots this year, only had a 53.2% true shooting percentage, and was rather inefficient on threes as well, at just 32.6%. Free throw rate wasn't great, so honestly, it sounds like I'm not selling this pick very well, but I think that's where you have to understand, like, production isn't always perfectly linear in terms of how good a player could be long term. And that's why someone like Will Riley, who the analytics don't necessarily completely love as a scorer and a shot maker moving forward, we've seen Washington overlook those things anyway recently. Bub Carrington did not have an elite analytical profile last year. Washington still took him in the lottery. So I think if you're looking at actual functional skills and tools, Will Riley does have a lot still when it comes to generating shots, creating open looks. And then if you bet and believe in his long-term upside as a shot maker and a scorer, it's a pretty good value pick here for Washington at 23 if things do end up working out for Will Riley long-term as a scorer. Pick number 24, the Atlanta Hawks here now on the clock. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Lakers through the New Orleans Pelicans, part of the DeJounte Murray trade. And the Hawks at pick 24, after going with Jase Richardson at number 13, here select forward Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. And after trading DeAndre Hunter away at the trade deadline, this is the type of player that could be a very beneficial addition for them. Sorber specifically, one thing that stood out to me in his analytical profile was his team defensive rating when he was on the floor. Georgetown just 96 points allowed per 100 possessions. He ended up being a plus 18.7 net rating on the year before he was injured, ultimately ending his Georgetown Hoyas freshman season a little prematurely. But the Hawks here specifically, I think, find a player who can be a complementary defensive piece for them. Someone who right now his offensive game kind of reminds me a little bit of Rui Hachimura coming out of college, where there's a lot of mid-range jump shots, there's a lot of mid-range shot making. That is kind of what Sorber relies on. Almost a little bit reminds me of DeAndre Hunter at Virginia as well, where the game kind of centers around the mid-range area a little bit more in college than it does in the NBA. Those are not the shots your NBA team's going to want you to take. Quinn Snyder's going to probably have a complete meltdown on the sideline if Sorber takes 3 mid-range jump shots in one game. But I think for Atlanta specifically, you're looking again for physical tools. You're looking for forward size, which is what Thomas Sorber possesses. And then defensively, he was very impactful for Georgetown this year as well, averaging 2 blocks per game and 1.5 steals per game. Like, that's something that I think could be extremely valuable for Atlanta, getting another kind of event creator, another player around Dyson Daniels, around some of their young core guys that they already have in place there. And also, quick shout out to Zachary Sachet. Been playing really great basketball, especially the last 40, 50 games of the year or so here. I've really loved seeing his continued development and continued confidence in his perimeter jump shooting specifically. It stands out every single time I've watched the Hawks play this year. Pick number 25, the Orlando Magic now. This pick comes from the Denver Nuggets. So at pick number 25, Orlando, who, at 16 went with Asa Newell out of Georgia. 25th overall, it's going to be interesting to see who I have them go with here because we've already addressed the center spot. I have them going with forward Alex Karaban from UConn, and I really talked about it a lot when we talked about the Liam McNeeley pick at pick number 17, right? Where UConn didn't have a true point guard. They lost a lot of their playmaking in Tristan Newton, Donovan Clingan, Stephon Castle. They lost a real scorer in Jordan Hawkins the year prior to that. This team, and this is the cost of winning multiple national championships consecutively, you're going to lose guys to the NBA, you're going to lose guys because every single team in America is going to want them, whether it's an NBA team or another college team. UConn has lost a lot of their top-end talent, and this year was the first year we really saw the ramifications of that. This team was not built to win without the guys that they lost, really. Alex Karaban was really overtaxed this year, and as a byproduct, he struggled in some ways. His field goal percentage was way down, his true shooting percentage was way down from previous years, and his three-point percentage was even down. Only shot about 35% on threes this year compared to other years where he was way more productive. But again, if you're thinking about how does this guy fit in the NBA, for Orlando, Alex Karaban's not going to play with the ball in his hands a ton. It's going to be Paulo Banchero, it's going to be Franz Wagner. If you envision Karaban as a high-end role player, a connective piece who understands how team offense should flow, knows when to make the extra pass, he's a very good swing passer, which is something, people are not going to talk about that. It's not a sexy trait to have. It's a very fun micro skill, though, that I think really does matter in the NBA a lot. Alex Karaban, to me, is someone who I think is going to have a 10-year career. I would very much bet on it. As long as he stays healthy, this guy's going to be in the NBA for a long time. And Orlando, I think, would really reap the benefits of taking him. The Magic love length. They love size and positional size specifically. Karaban, someone who has a very good wingspan, has natural defensive playmaking tendencies, very good off-ball positioning IQ defensively. This guy's an NBA player. Getting him at 25th overall is a steal in my opinion, and the Magic should be very, very, very happy that he's on the board for them here as a guy who would fit in, be a connective kind of tissue piece for them around their other core nucleus of young pieces. Moving on now to pick number 26, the Brooklyn Nets here with back-to-back selections at 26 and 27. The first one here, I have them going with forward Jaxel Lendeborg from UAB. He's been extremely productive this year for the Blazers, and specifically looking at his rebounding rate, you look at his defensive event creation rate, where you're looking at steal percentage, block percentage. He has been wonderful this season for UAB, and really, like, honestly, for a mid-major, has stood out in a huge way because of how much better he is than pretty much everyone around him athletically. His numbers this year are insane. A 5.2% block rate, a 3% steal rate, averaged 1.7 steals per game, 1.8 blocks per game, boasted a 1.91 assist to turnover rate, which is incredible. And then he was a double-double machine as well. You remember, had a 30-20 game a couple weeks ago, but finished the year averaging about 18 points, a little bit over 11 rebounds per game as well. And he was efficient too in this. Shot 52% from the floor, almost a 60% true shooting percentage. The numbers love him. Like, he had a 26.6 net rating, so he was very, very good. And when he was on the floor, UAB was a lot better than whoever they were facing. So, it's not like this surefire no-brainer pick because he was a mid-major player, and there aren't a lot of projectable high upside offensive tools for him to work with, in my opinion, as a actual scorer in the NBA. But what Jaxel Lendeborg does have is very good functional traits, and he kind of has that want-to attitude to him where he's going to get on the glass, he's going to rebound, he's going to impact the game defensively. And again, if you're looking at Brooklyn trying to improve their roster, finding players who want to do things and can do things very, very well that kind of round out your team, flesh out your roster a bit, Lendeborg's a huge additive piece because of that. Moving on to 27, staying on the Brooklyn Nets here now with this draft class specifically, walking away with Liam McNeeley, Trey Johnson, Jaxel Lendeborg. We feel like we've addressed a wide number of things for this roster. And at 27, I have the Brooklyn Nets here selecting now forward Nick Clifford, someone who does have some of that shot-making upside. And I think this is one of the harder prospects to really talk about. He has an older draft age, obviously a multi-year college player, started his career for the Colorado Buffaloes, then ended up transferring to the Colorado State Rams, and really found a home there with Colorado State, where he was really, really productive for them. Had a ton of great moments, and specifically the last 2 years were just really, really strong. Boasted a 60% true shooting percentage this year. Honestly, a very surprisingly good assist rate. And another guy who was just active, 19 points per game, nearly 10 rebounds a night, does a lot of little things well, but I think unlike Lendeborg, has a little bit more of a translatable offensive game where he can be a little bit more reliable to go to, a little bit more of a functional scorer for a team if you want him to play in that way. Now, what's the upside there? I don't think it's very high. I'm not the biggest Nick Clifford guy, but this is a player who I think if you harness his game correctly, can be very productive. Shot 37% on threes this past year, almost 38% on threes. And again, some of those came on higher degrees of difficulty off the dribble, off of movement. He was the 1A option for Colorado State. So I think if you're looking for Brooklyn adding in talent, Lendeborg and Clifford at 26 and 27 could be some higher talented, mid-major slash, I mean, Colorado State is not really a mid-major, right? But you're looking at them as players who can contribute right away. They're NBA ready in a way. And they both give you different things, right? Clifford gives you some of that offensive game. Lendeborg gives you this kind of translatable, defensive, versatile piece who could be used in a number of different ways on the defensive end of the court as well. Pick 28, the Boston Celtics here now, a team that obviously is at the forefront of the three-point crusade in the NBA. Comes with a lot of criticism and skepticism because of that. But I think, first of all, don't look back, Cleveland. The Celtics are kind of catching up on their tail a little bit here. I just think Boston's a team that they're very good. Like, We all know that. And I think it's just these picks here at the end of the first round and their second round picks moving forward become so essential because of how expensive their roster is. The new ownership group, I hope, will understand that keeping this core together is going to be really good for them long term. And that once you decide to stop spending, it's really hard to start spending again because you need to have the talent internally. You need to have bird rights on guys to really pay them with the new CBA long term. So I think for Boston specifically, these draft picks become more and more essential because the best cheap labor you can find comes in the back end of the first round and in the second round. And if the Celtics can really find that here in these drafts, it's going to be huge for them. With this pick, I have them going with wing LeBaron Philon for Alabama, who I thought had a pretty good NCAA tournament run for himself. Player who, he shot the ball pretty well during the NCAA tournament. I do have questions about him long-term as an actual shooter. In the NBA, I don't know how reliable he's going to be, but for Boston specifically, the things that stand out to me that Philon can bring for them is another point of attack defender, someone who's comfortable moving his feet out on the perimeter, has active hands, can get into the passing lanes a little bit, but more specifically is someone who's going to be very comfortable mirroring offensive movements with his defensive movement, something we talked about earlier in this mock with VJ Edgecombe. So I think for Boston specifically, 28th overall, you're looking for someone who can be a kind of connective tissue piece. Again, we talked about it with Alex Caravan at 25 for Orlando, now at 28 for Boston. I think LeBaron Philon, someone who can drive kick. I think that's obviously such a big part of Boston's game in general. Someone who can attack closeouts, get through him. Now, the only concern for me is, will Philon be aggressively closed out to on in the NBA? Probably not. How often is he able to even attack closeouts because of that? I don't know. I don't think the upside's immense here for Philon, but I do think he could be kind of an additive piece as maybe an 8th or 9th guy in the rotation. I still am very optimistic, obviously, long-term about Baylor Shireman's role there for Boston. And I do think their team, you're not looking to address a whole bunch of needs when you still have Al Horford, Baylor Shireman, Peyton Pritchard, of course, probably the 6th man of the year, Peyton Pritchard. He's just been brilliant for them. They don't have a lot of needs, right? They still have Luke Cornett too. So this team, I think just you're getting another player who can be kind of your hybrid, like 2-3 in your lineup from a night-to-night basis if you absolutely need him to play. Pick number 29, the Phoenix Suns here now. This pick comes from the Cleveland Cavaliers, part of that very unique trade the Suns made with the Jazz at the NBA trade deadline involving their 2031 unprotected first-round pick. What a trade for Utah, huh? But 29th overall, I have the Phoenix Suns here selecting guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas. And this is one of the prospects that I think right now is getting a lot of disrespect. And I understand it because it really stems from his 38.5% field goal percentage this year, where he has just not been an effective offensive player. The true shooting percentage is very, very low. He's not been an effective scorer. But what he has been is a very, very, very effective playmaker and passer, where he's boasting a 3.64 assist to turnover rate. Very, very productive, averaging over 5 assists per game this year for the Razorbacks and less than 1.5 turnovers per game. Also, pretty good steal percentage at 2.7%, averaging 1.5 steals per game. And again, that assist rate, very, very high, 30.5%. So there's a lot to like. His net rating was still positive this year for Arkansas, 7.4. Usage rate wasn't even that high, honestly, 23.6% usage on 5 assists per game, which is pretty interesting. Now, there is a little bit of that Ty Washington in here. I talked about that last week a little bit as well. But I think for Phoenix, a team that's starting Colin Gillespie right now, Tyus Jones' future in Phoenix kind of up in the air. I don't really know. He's been coming off the bench for them. Like, the Suns, and if they blow it up too, like, that's a very real possibility. Last week I talked about them drafting Yaxel Lendeberg, trying to kind of make this team work. There's also just a chance the Suns say, our team's not good. If we miss the play-in or miss the playoffs this year, we need to figure something out. We need to pivot. We need to change direction. And Boogie Fland could be that upside pick for them as well. Not only as a guy who maybe would fit into their roster as a playmaker, creator of their offense, but also could be a long-term piece that they look at and say, we're going to try and develop this guy. Hire a recruit, someone who, has some real tools to work with, specifically in the playmaking department. And I think the Suns at 29 would be willing to take that kind of stab in the back end of the first round. Pick number 30, the LA Clippers here now. This pick is a swap with the Thunder, who had, I believe, pick 21 or 22 in this mock draft, if I'm remembering correctly. So now at pick number 30 here, the LA Clippers, do select guard Ben Saraf from Ratiopharm Ulm. Slid a little bit in this mock draft, and that's something I want to talk about here as well. Creation bets are sometimes the hardest thing to project where they're going to go if they're not a premier creation bet. So we're talking about Cooper Flagg as a creator, right, of offense. We're talking about Dylan Harper, creator of offense. Those guys, very, very easy to project where they're going to go. They're going to be top 2, top 3 picks, both of them. It's very easy to understand where they're likely going to get drafted. When it comes to these other guards, though, like a Ben Saraf, like a Boogie Fland, it gets a little bit trickier because, one, the amount of teams that are in the playoffs that need more guys that can create offense, first of all, that number is not very high. Most teams that need more offensive help don't make the playoffs. So then you're like, okay, well, picks 16 through 30 are a little bit trickier to find spots for guards. Sometimes you can look at teams that are going to have contractual needs, like the Suns, right, when it comes to a guard, or the Clippers in this case, right? They still need another guard behind James Harden. And that's why Ben Saraf makes some sense for me. He's also a left-handed guard. So with the way that a lot of the Clippers plays are designed to get Harden to his left hand, you can keep those same plays the exact same direction. You don't have to flip anything. It keeps things pretty plain, simple, basic for your offense if you want to go that way. And Ben Saraf is someone who can read the weak side of the floor, can utilize rollers. I think him and Zubats could have a long-term interesting pairing. The Israeli guard here was really, really good this past summer when he was playing in U18s and really dominated. Ended up becoming the MVP of that tournament and was really, really productive and successful. And I think, yeah, guards, creation bets, they do end up falling sometimes in the draft, just like we're seeing here with Ben Saraf in this mock draft. But I do think at the end of the day, he's still going to return first-round value. And I think for the Clippers specifically, this is the kind of player that they could really, really use on their roster long-term, specifically for when either James Harden's not in the game or when they're looking at life post-James Harden, post-Kawhi Leonard. They're going to need guys who can handle, create, dribble, pass, shoot, like I've always talked about. Ben Saraf, someone who can definitely do those things for them. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.